They always say change is good. But on that Monday morning, as I sat across from the new boss I'd barely met, with a weak cup of office coffee cooling in my hands, change felt like a knife in the back. His name was Logan. Logan Pierce. 30-something. Expensive suit. Gelled hair. The kind of man who spoke like a TED Talk but listened like a brick wall. It was his first day. Mine? My 3,214th. 10 years. 10 years of early mornings, late nights, skipped vacations, patched systems, and quiet successes. I didn't need applause. I needed respect. And now, with his lips curled into a corporate smirk, Logan was about to throw it all away before even learning how the coffee machine worked. He leaned back, steepling his fingers like he'd practiced this exact posture in front of a mirror. "Jenna," he began, voice smooth like a marketing pitch. "This isn't personal. We're just restructuring. Fresh faces, new energy. You understand, right?" I stared at him for a second, letting the silence settle. "Of course," I said, my voice even. "Thanks for the notice." His smile widened. He thought I was being professional, cooperative, maybe even grateful. But deep down, I wasn't even angry yet. Not yet. I stood slowly, brushing non-existent dust from my blazer. My heart was pounding, but my face remained calm. Polished. The version of me they had grown used to. Composed, competent, quiet. I knew every corner of this building, every weakness in its systems, every shortcut in its code. Because I built them. From the ground up. And he had no idea. No idea that the software he was about to gamble the company's future on, my software, wasn't theirs to command. The patent was in my name. Filed years ago. Ironclad. I walked out of the office without another word, the door clicking softly behind me. The hallway felt longer than usual, fluorescent lights buzzing above me. My coworkers were glued to their screens, whispering, stealing glances. The news had spread like it always did in corporate buildings. Not officially, but fast. Nobody met my eyes. No one ever does when loyalty becomes inconvenient. Back at my desk, I packed my things slowly. A photo of me and my brother from a hiking trip in Oregon. A coffee mug with a cracked handle. A small cactus I'd named Wallace that somehow survived 3 office moves. I moved deliberately, letting the routine ground me. My badge, my USB key, and finally, my laptop. That's when the ache began to set in. Not anger, not sadness, but something heavier. Betrayal. I had built that system during sleepless nights when the budget didn't allow for another engineer. I had documented every step, designed every patch, and made sure no one could manipulate it without the proper keys. My keys. I had warned the board years ago. Put my name on the software or I walk. They agreed, signed the documents, filed the paperwork, then forgot. They always forget the woman behind the curtain until the curtain collapses. By the time I got home, the weight of the day began to settle. I changed into sweatpants, sat at my kitchen counter, and stared blankly at the blinking cursor on my laptop. But instead of tears, a slow, cold clarity washed over me. Logan Pierce had made a mistake. He thought he was cutting costs. He thought I was replaceable. He thought I was just an employee. What he didn't know was that the very foundation of Archer systems, the database infrastructure, the client dashboards, the custom logic trees that held every deal together, belonged to me. And in 5 days, I would make sure he knew it. Because the license? It had to be renewed every fiscal quarter. And Friday at midnight, it expired. I had 2 options. Renew it quietly and walk away with my pride, or let the software revert to restricted mode. A locked system. Inaccessible without my private key. No sabotage, no hacking. Just business. Their game, my rules. I sipped my tea slowly, my mind calculating every angle. If they wanted to save themselves, they'd have to crawl back. Not for my job, but for permission to keep the company running. A smirk tugged at the corner of my mouth. the same kind Logan had worn this morning. Let's see how he liked it. Next Friday would be unforgettable. And I wouldn't even have to raise my voice. Tuesday morning arrived like any other, but the air in the office felt different. Too quiet, too aware. I walked in through the front doors of Archer Systems like I had every day for the past decade. Nobody stopped me. Of course they didn't. HR hadn't processed anything yet. Paperwork takes time. Until then, I was still technically employed. Still expected to be professional. Still expected to smile. I did, but it wasn't the kind of smile they were used to. Logan's office door was closed. Probably busy adjusting his chair, hanging his degrees on the wall, pretending he understood the business he'd just inherited. He had no idea I was already preparing the slow collapse of his perfect little first week. 5 days. That's all they had left. I reached my desk. Well, the desk I used to call mine, and found a young woman sitting there. Fresh out of grad school by the look of her. Wide eyes, nervous fingers. She stood up quickly when she saw me. "Oh, sorry, I didn't know you'd be coming in," she stammered. I smiled politely. "No worries. Transition period. I'm here to help." Her name was Emily. She'd been hired to replace me, though she didn't know the full story. Yet. She offered me a tight, embarrassed smile as I pulled a chair next to her and began explaining the system. I showed her the user interface, the code-based structure, and how the client dashboards worked. She asked good questions. Smart, thoughtful, but I could tell it was overwhelming. The system was complex. Purposefully complex. Not out of spite, but out of necessity. Archer Systems managed hundreds of millions in client data. There were no shortcuts. Every corner of the architecture required precision, depth, experience, none of which Logan had, and none of which Emily could fake. As the hours passed, I kept my tone even, my manner calm. I wasn't cruel. I didn't want to sabotage her. She wasn't the problem. She was just a symptom of a deeper sickness in this industry. The assumption that value could be replaced, that experience could be downloaded like an update. But some things can't be replaced. Some people shouldn't be replaced. At noon, I went to the cafe across the street and sat by the window, my laptop open in front of me. I pulled up the original patent files, the ones I'd kept saved in encrypted cloud storage for years. I reread every line just to be sure. Everything was airtight. All rights, including derivative systems and extensions, remain the sole property of the original architect unless expressly transferred through a written and signed agreement. There was no such agreement. Archer Systems never thought they'd need one. That was their first mistake. I sipped my coffee slowly as I opened a second tab and began drafting the formal revocation notice. Calm, legal, effective. It wouldn't lock them out entirely. It would revert their systems to evaluation mode. Restricted access. Limited functionality. Just enough to paralyze them. Just enough to make them remember my name. I didn't send it yet. Not today. The timing had to be perfect. The license expired at 11:59 p.m. Friday. If I submitted the notice Friday at 6 a.m., it would trigger the automatic reversion by close of business. Right when their biggest weekly report was due. Right when clients logged in to access updated dashboards. The fallout would be instant and untraceable. I closed the laptop and leaned back in my chair, eyes drifting toward the window. Across the street, I saw Logan stepping out of the building, phone pressed to his ear. He laughed at something. Loud, confident, unaware. He had no clue the company he was leading was balanced on a wire. That the wire was mine. That I could cut it any time. Back upstairs, Emily was waiting for me, trying to troubleshoot a minor bug in the analytics module. I guided her through it, watching her hands tremble slightly as she typed. "You okay?" I asked gently. She nodded. "Yeah, just a lot to take in. They told me the system was simple." I gave a short laugh. They always do. She paused, looking at me. "Why are you helping me?" I met her eyes. "Because it's not your fault." That was the truth. I had no bitterness toward her. My war wasn't with the innocent. It was with the arrogant. With the people who thought power meant you could discard the very foundation of your success and still stand tall. By 5:30 p.m., I left the office with nothing in my hands but my phone. I didn't need to take anything with me. They were already standing on my work. The question wasn't if they'd fall, it was how loud the crash would be, and whether anyone would try to stop it before it was too late. By Wednesday, the air in the office had changed. It was subtle at first. Whispers behind closed doors, longer than usual meetings, a flurry of emails with subject lines like urgent, dashboard delay, or client login timeout. I recognized the signs immediately. The system wasn't crashing, yet, but it was starting to cough, stumble, like an engine that had been pushed too hard without ever being serviced. I knew exactly why. Emily approached me in the late morning, her brow furrowed, frustration written all over her face. She was holding a sticky note with hastily scribbled client IDs. "Jenna," she said, "3 different users are locked out of the analytics dashboard, and the system's throwing an authentication error when I try to reset their access. I followed the steps you showed me." She was doing her best. I could see that. She was smart, but the system wasn't built for beginners. It had layers, protections, conditional structures that even experienced engineers had to unravel like puzzles. "I'll take a look," I said calmly, and together we sat at the desk. The problem wasn't in the code. It was in the license. The expiration had begun a soft countdown. Quiet, but visible if you knew where to look. A warning message embedded in the back-end logs. Evaluation period ending in 2 days. Renew license or expect restricted access. The system was obeying its instructions perfectly. Everything was unfolding exactly as I designed it. And no one, certainly not Logan, had any idea what was coming. At 2 p.m., the office held its usual all-hands meeting in the glass conference room. Logan stood at the head of the table like a man who still believed he was in control. His tone was cheerful, but I could tell it was forced. Too upbeat. Too polished. "I just want to say I'm really proud of how everyone's adapting," he began, clasping his hands together. "I know transitions can be tough, but I'm confident that this team, especially with fresh talent like Emily, is moving in the right direction." There it was again. The casual dismissal of experience, the glorification of new blood as if loyalty and knowledge were liabilities instead of assets. I said nothing. I just watched him. "Any questions before we wrap?" Logan asked, scanning the room. There was a brief pause, then Anthony from IT raised his hand. "Yeah, actually, some clients have been experiencing login delays and reporting partial outages on their dashboards. We're looking into it, but it's been tough to trace." Logan didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. "Just growing pains," he said with a grin. "We'll sort it out." I nearly laughed out loud. That was his answer? Growing pains? No one said anything else. The meeting ended in awkward silence, with employees exchanging side glances as they returned to their desks. Anthony passed me on his way out and muttered under his breath, "It's getting worse." "I know," I replied softly. Back at my own station, I opened my terminal and ran a passive diagnostic. Not to fix it, but to watch it. The system was still functional, but the errors were escalating. Minor things. Refresh lag, API call failures, intermittent timeouts. But the real collapse would come Friday. These were just tremors before the quake. I could have warned them. I could have told Logan to check the license. But I didn't. I had warned them, years ago. They chose to forget. They chose arrogance over respect. Now they could deal with the consequences. That evening, as I walked out of the building, I saw Logan in the lobby, talking animatedly to someone on the phone. His voice was tight now, tinged with frustration. Not panic, yet, but tension. He glanced at me as I passed, giving a curt nod. I returned it with a blank expression. In his mind, I was still just a box to check. A courtesy. A relic of the old guard being phased out. He hadn't connected the dots. Not yet. At home, I lit a candle, made tea, and opened my laptop. The revocation letter was ready, sitting in draft. I read it over one more time. Per patent number 1185-43-B, ownership of all proprietary systems and associated frameworks remains solely with the creator. Effective immediately. Access is rescinded. All I had to do was click send, but not tonight. Tomorrow, the final day, would be the turning point. The cracks were visible, but they still didn't believe the building could fall. They would. Thursday felt like the moment right before a storm. Still, heavy, waiting. When I stepped into the office, the silence wasn't just awkward. It was brittle. As if the entire building knew something was wrong but didn't dare say it out loud. I walked past rows of desks where conversations were reduced to whispers, where monitors flashed with error screens and support tickets piled up faster than IT could respond. I saw Anthony pacing by the server room, phone pressed to his ear. He looked up and gave me a grim nod. I didn't need to ask. I already knew. The system was unraveling. The first signs were subtle. The client dashboard refused to load for a handful of users in Europe. Then came the misfires, data exports timing out, notifications failing to send, the reporting engine choking on its own scripts. Every error was a symptom of the same underlying cause. The license was expiring, and by now the system was loudly reminding them of it. Back at my temporary station, I logged in and quietly observed the logs. Warnings filled the screen. Alert license status. Expiring in 14 hours. Warning, access to key modules will be restricted at 11:59 p.m. EST. Error licensing API authentication failed. Invalid renewal token. Still, no one had come to me. Not Logan. Not HR. Not even the board. They were scrambling behind closed doors, no doubt pointing fingers, trying to patch something they didn't understand. I imagine Logan sitting in his office, furiously Googling software licensing crisis, while Emily quietly panicked under the pressure she never signed up for. It would have been almost funny, if it wasn't so predictable. By noon, the first escalation came through. One of our largest clients, a financial firm in Chicago, couldn't access their quarterly analytics dashboard. Their COO personally emailed Logan and CC'd 3 board members. Logan stormed out of his office a few minutes later, face red, tie loosened, voice strained. "Where's Jenna?" he barked. I stood calmly. "Right here." He approached fast, like a man who'd suddenly realized the fire he ignored had reached his front door. "Have you been seeing these issues? Why didn't anyone tell me this was happening?" I tilted my head. "People have been talking about it for 2 days. Anthony flagged it in the meeting yesterday." He blinked. For a moment, I saw it. The fear. A crack in the confident facade. "Can you fix it?" he asked, trying to keep his voice level. I paused, not because I didn't have an answer, but because I wanted the silence to settle. I wanted him to feel what it was like to wait for someone else's mercy. "That depends," I said. "On what?" "On whether you still think I'm replaceable." His mouth opened, closed, no reply. I returned to my seat. "I'll be here until the end of the day, as agreed. After that, I'm no longer under contract." Logan stood there a second longer before retreating to his office. The rest of the staff had heard everything. A few people stared, most quickly looked away. But the balance had shifted, and they felt it. That evening, I left precisely at 5. No overtime, no courtesy. I walked past Logan's office without a glance. He was still there, slouched over his desk, shoulders hunched, staring at a screen filled with numbers he couldn't fix. At home, the sky outside my apartment was turning dark, streaked with red like the last breath of daylight. I brewed a cup of tea, sat at my desk, and opened the email draft one final time. No edits needed. I clicked send. The legal revocation letter was delivered to Archer Systems, its executive team, and their legal counsel. The subject line was simple. Termination of software license, effective midnight. I exhaled. It was done. I didn't scream. I didn't celebrate. I simply shut my laptop and let the weight of 10 years roll off my shoulders. Tomorrow would be Friday, and everything they depended on would start slipping through their fingers. Not because I sabotaged anything, but because they let go of the one person who had been holding it all together. Friday, 6 a.m. My alarm went off, but I was already awake. I'd been up since 5, sipping coffee at my kitchen window, watching the city stretch into life below. On the surface, it looked like any other morning, but I knew better. I opened my inbox. A flood of replies had already come in overnight. Legal inquiries, auto-generated server warnings, a failed attempt to renew the license. Too late. At exactly 11:59 p.m. the night before, Archer Systems' access to my software had officially expired. Not hacked, not broken, just revoked. Clean, legal, final. The moment they opened their eyes today, they'd step into a world without a working foundation. I took a long sip of coffee as I opened the remote monitoring panel, my quiet little backdoor view into the system's diagnostics. I didn't interfere. I simply watched. 7:32 a.m. System alert, core modules offline. Error, authentication server not responding. Alert, analytics dashboard unavailable. Critical client access denied. Invalid license, it had begun. By 8 a.m., my phone buzzed. Emily. I let it ring the first time. On the second, I answered. Jenna? Hey, it's happening. Everything's failing. Client logins, dashboards, internal portals. Anthony's losing it, and Logan he's panicking. Her voice was laced with fear. Not for herself, but for the mess she'd walked into. Did you check the logs? I asked calmly. Yes, it says the license is invalid. But how can that? I revoked it, I said softly. Silence. But why didn't you tell anyone? I did, I replied. Just not recently. It was never their software, Emily. They just acted like it was. She didn't respond right away. Eventually, she whispered, Logan's going to freak. Sounds like he already has. I ended the call. At 9:12 a.m., the news reached me before they could. System-wide failure hits Archer Systems. Clients unable to access financial platforms. Major outage in progress. By 9:30 a.m., my phone lit up again, this time from a blocked number. I didn't need to guess. I answered. Jenna. Logan's voice was tight, brittle. We have a situation. I know. The software. Your software. Shut down. Everything is failing. The client portals, the internal database, the reporting tools. The board is calling. Clients are threatening lawsuits. What the hell did you do? I didn't do anything, I said coolly. I just stopped doing everything for you. You can't be serious. We had a deal. You were supposed to finish the transition. You ended the deal. You ended it on your first day. A beat of silence. Then, softer. Look, we can figure this out. Just tell me what you want. I'll talk to the board. It's too late. No, come on, Jenna. Be reasonable. Name your price. I almost laughed. Now he wanted to negotiate. Now that the walls were collapsing and the alarms were blaring. You don't get it, do you? I said. This isn't about money. You fired the person holding your company together. Now you're watching what happens when that person leaves. Please, he said. And it wasn't just panic anymore. It was desperation. I'm not coming back, Logan, I said quietly. I've already moved on. Maybe you should too. I hung up. And just like that, the weight I had carried for 10 years, every late night, every ignored idea, every board meeting where my name wasn't even mentioned, lifted. They were finally seeing what I had been all along. Essential. And they were seeing it too late. By noon, Archer Systems was trending on social media. For all the wrong reasons. Clients furious after massive Archer outage. Internal source confirms licensing failure, company in chaos. Stock plummets 19% in morning trading. I refreshed my feed and watched the panic spread. Investors pulling out, clients demanding answers, former employees posting thinly veiled "I told you so" messages. And I did nothing. No interviews, no gloating, no retaliation. I didn't need to destroy them. They were doing that all on their own. By Friday evening, Archer Systems was in free fall. Their website had been reduced to a single error message. Support hotlines were flooded. News outlets circled like vultures. And inside their glass tower, executives scrambled to rewrite contracts, calm investors, and spin a story no one was buying. Meanwhile, I was sitting on my balcony, legs curled under me, watching the skyline flicker in the dusk. The noise, the chaos, the panic, it all felt so far away now. Like watching a storm roll through a town you no longer lived in. My phone buzzed again. Logan. The 6th time that day. I let it go to voicemail. Then I played it back. Jenna, listen. The board. Everyone's looking to me for answers, and I don't have any. The software's locked. Legal says there's no way around it without your approval. The clients are threatening legal action. I know I screwed up. I was arrogant. I didn't ask questions. I didn't respect what you built. Please, just call me back. His voice cracked slightly near the end. It wasn't the sound of a man in control anymore. It was the sound of a man who finally understood the cost of cutting corners. I didn't call him back. Because this story wasn't about Logan Pierce anymore. It was about me. About the 10 years I spent giving everything to a company that saw me as a line item. About the mornings I showed up early, the weekends I spent troubleshooting someone else's mistake, the ideas I shared in meetings only to have someone else repeat them louder. And now? Now they were left holding a hollow empire, gutted by their own carelessness. I opened my laptop one last time and checked my inbox. Offers, dozens. Tech firms, venture capitalists, startups, even a few competitors of Archer Systems who were now very, very interested in the woman who brought a multi-million-dollar company to its knees without raising her voice. But I wasn't looking for a job. I wasn't looking to build someone else's dream again. So I hit delete. Every offer, every flattery-filled message, every corporate pitch. Gone. I didn't need validation. I needed vision. The next morning, I walked into the offices of a small but well-connected venture group downtown. The founder was a woman I'd met years ago at a conference, someone who remembered my name when no one else did. She greeted me with a smile. "Jenna Sinclair, word travels fast." I smiled back. "So I've heard." We sat down in her sunlit corner office. She didn't waste time. "So, what do you want to build?" I told her. Not another bloated, top-down tech firm. No corporate rot. No faceless middle management. A lean, agile company that prioritized brilliance over bureaucracy, where creators owned their work, where engineers had a voice, where respect wasn't a buzzword. It was built into the code. By the time I finished, she nodded once. "We'll fund it. Whatever you need." I shook her hand, and just like that, I wasn't the woman who'd been fired on a Monday anymore. I was the woman who wrote her own beginning. Back at home, I brewed a fresh cup of coffee and opened a clean document on my screen. I titled it, Foundations. Not just a business plan, a blueprint. For a new kind of company. One that didn't treat loyalty like a weakness. One that didn't assume quiet meant small. One that understood the real cost of overlooking the people who built the walls they leaned on. As I typed, my phone buzzed again. One final message from Logan. "Jenna, I resigned. Effective immediately. I hope you're happy." I stared at the screen for a moment, then deleted the message without replying. It wasn't happiness I felt. It was something deeper. Freedom. They had tried to erase me, but I hadn't disappeared. I evolved. I closed the laptop and stepped out onto the balcony. The city stretched before me. Open, alive, waiting. This wasn't revenge. This was justice, and it tasted better than anything money could buy. Because the truth is, the best revenge isn't destroying what tried to bury you. It's becoming someone they can never reach again. The last conversation I ever had with my mother ended with 6 words that didn't make sense to me at the time. Be careful who you call family. She said it as she smoothed out the blanket on her hospital bed, her hands trembling from the chemo, her voice soft but sharp. I thought it was the medication talking, the fatigue, the fear. I never imagined she was warning me. My name is Lisa, and 1 week ago, I found out my brother sold the house I inherited from our mother, without telling me. We'd grown up in that house. A small 2-story with peeling blue shutters, an old oak tree out front, and the creaky porch swing where Mom used to read to us every Sunday. After our dad left when I was 8, that house became her world. And when she passed away last month, I thought she had passed that world on to me. Turns out I was wrong. Or so I thought. It started with a phone call. Hi, this is Mark Cunningham from Red Elm Realty. Just confirming you've vacated the property at 318 West Hollow Drive. The buyers will be moving in next week. I blinked, nearly dropping my coffee. Excuse me? I haven't sold anything. A pause on the other end. You're Lisa Wexler, correct? Yes. Another pause. I have a signed agreement from a Mr. Brian Wexler. He indicated he was the sole inheritor. My stomach dropped. Brian is my brother. We both inherited that house. More silence. Then a rushed, "You may want to speak with your attorney." I hung up and immediately called Brian. It went to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. I got in my car and drove to his apartment instead. He answered the door like he'd been expecting me, wearing that smug half-smile he's had since we were kids. "You sold Mom's house?" I demanded, my voice already shaking. He leaned against the doorframe. "I thought you'd be grateful. You couldn't keep up with the maintenance anyway. You didn't even tell me." He shrugged. "You were always more attached to her memory than the house. I needed the money. I deserve it more." Those words, "I deserve it more." I couldn't even speak. I turned and left, hands clenched into fists. By the time I got home, I was already dialing the number of Mom's lawyer, Grace Lynn, the woman who had handled Mom's will. I hadn't read it in detail. Mom had passed barely 2 weeks earlier. Everything was still a blur of flowers, condolences, casseroles, and aching silence. But now I needed answers. Grace met me the next morning in her downtown office. She was calm, collected, the kind of lawyer who always wore soft colors and had a way of delivering brutal truths like gentle weather. "I'm sorry, Lisa. I thought your brother would at least wait until probate was finalized." "He didn't wait. He already sold it." She raised an eyebrow. "That's interesting." I blinked. "What?" Grace reached for the thick envelope labeled Last Will and Testament, Margaret Wexler. Your mother included a clause in the fine print. It wasn't highlighted because I assumed it would never become relevant. She flipped a few pages and pointed to a paragraph I'd completely overlooked the day of the reading. The property located at 318 West Hollow Drive is to be inherited by both children, Lisa and Brian Wexler. However, under no circumstances may the house be sold without the unanimous written consent of both parties. Any attempt to sell the property without such consent will render the transaction void. I stared at it, barely breathing. "He sold it anyway," I whispered. Grace leaned back, hands folded. "Then the sale is invalid, and if the buyer wasn't made aware of this clause, it may count as misrepresentation or even fraud." A cold satisfaction began to creep in beneath the hurt. "So I can get it back?" Grace nodded. "And if I were your brother, I'd be very worried. He forgot to read the fine print." The gravel crunched under my tires as I pulled into the driveway of the only place that had ever felt like home. The for sale sign was still staked in the front lawn, now branded with a red sold sticker. And in front of the porch stood a moving truck, half unloaded. Men carried furniture into the house like they owned the place. They didn't. Not yet. I parked crookedly, slammed my car door, and marched up the drive. My heartbeat was thudding in my ears. And then I saw him. The man giving orders to the movers wore a navy blazer and polished shoes that didn't belong in a place like this. His head turned as I approached, and the moment our eyes met, the world seemed to tilt slightly. Jason Monroe. Of all the people who could have bought the house, it had to be my ex. Lisa? He said, surprise clear on his face. What are you doing here? I could ask you the same thing, I shot back. He took a few steps forward, brow furrowing. I bought this house. Your brother sold it to me 2 weeks ago. I had no idea. This house isn't his to sell, I cut in. I own half of it. The color drained from his face. You're kidding. I wish I was. We stared at each other in a silence thick with tension. It had been 4 years since we'd last spoken, since our breakup ended with more silence than closure. Jason had been my first love, and now he was the man unloading boxes into my childhood home. You need to stop the movers, I said. He hesitated, then turned and barked, hold everything. The workers paused, arms full of boxes. I could feel my pulse calming slightly, the only thing steady in a whirlwind of betrayal, anger, and disbelief. Lisa, Jason said more gently, your brother assured me everything was legal. He signed the deed, showed me the probate documents. He forged this sale, I snapped. The will specifically says both heirs have to consent in writing. He never even asked me. That signature on the sale agreement? It's just his. Jason ran a hand through his hair. Then the sale's not valid. Correct. He looked away, embarrassed. I didn't know. I wouldn't have if I'd known. I crossed my arms, trying to contain the emotions bubbling up inside me. I don't care about your buyer's remorse. I care that Brian tried to erase me from my own inheritance. Jason gestured toward the porch. Can we talk inside? I hesitated. The porch swing was still there. So was the wind chime Mom had bought at the flea market when we were kids. This was still my house. At least half of it. Fine, I said, and walked up the steps first. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and sawdust. Boxes lined the hallway, but much of the place was still untouched. Mom's floral wallpaper. Her antique clock ticking in the corner. Her presence clung to the walls like perfume. Jason sat down at the kitchen table and gestured for me to join him. I did, reluctantly. I get why you're angry, he said. And you're right to be. But I promise I acted in good faith. I'm not blaming you, I replied. Not entirely. But Brian? He knew exactly what he was doing. Jason frowned. He said, a lot of things, actually. Said you didn't want the house. That you'd moved on. That you couldn't afford the upkeep. I scoffed. Typical. He also said you never came to visit Mom when she got sick. That you were too busy. My jaw clenched. I was with her every Thursday night for the last year of her life. I cooked her meals and helped her bathe when she couldn't stand. He showed up maybe twice. And then suddenly, when she's gone, he wants to play devoted son and claim the house? Jason looked down. Then I got played. He paused. There's something else. I didn't think much of it at the time, but he was pushing me to close fast. He said he was under financial pressure, that the funds were already committed to a new business venture. I narrowed my eyes. That sounds exactly like Brian. Did he say what the venture was? Number. But he seemed nervous, jittery. He didn't even want to hire a lawyer, just used a friend to draw up the contract. I should have seen it. I pulled out my phone and showed Jason a photo Grace had texted me earlier. The clause in the will. Jason studied it, then blew out a breath. Well, that's clear. Without your signature, this sale is worthless. Then do me a favor, I said, standing. Put the boxes back in the truck. Jason looked me in the eyes. I'll call my attorney. You'll hear from me soon. I paused at the door, looking back. Jason, why this house? Why now? He hesitated. Because it felt like a place I used to know. And maybe I thought, if I came back, I'd find something I lost. I didn't respond. I walked out the door, heart pounding, I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Mom's house. My house being emptied box by box. I saw Jason's confused face, Brian's smugness, the betrayal coiled around everything like smoke. By morning, my phone was filled with messages from Grace, my lawyer. She had started the process of filing a legal injunction to halt the sale, and she sounded confident. But I wasn't. Because something about Brian's actions, about what Jason had said, wasn't just careless or selfish. It felt desperate. At noon, I drove to Brian's place again. This time, he didn't ignore the doorbell. He opened the door in sweatpants and a faded hoodie, his hair sticking out like he hadn't slept either. "You again," he muttered. "Yes, again. I don't have time for this, Lisa." "Make time." He sighed, stepped aside, and let me in. His apartment was a mess. Empty pizza boxes, half-drunk energy drinks, bills scattered across the table like confetti after a sad party. I picked one up. Overdue. 3 months. I tossed it back down. This what Mom's house was for? To cover your mess? "You think you know everything," he said, voice rising. "I know enough. You forged a sale. You lied to Jason. You tried to cut me out of my own inheritance. And for what?" He rubbed his face and dropped into a chair. "You think this is just about money?" His voice was low, bitter. "You have no idea what's really going on." "Then explain it to me." He didn't speak for a long moment. Then, "The business. It's going under." I blinked. "What business?" He looked up at me, eyes tired. "The investment group I started last year, with Carter and Malik." I vaguely remembered him bragging about it at Thanksgiving. Something about flipping commercial properties, diversifying portfolios. He used buzzwords like armor to hide how unstable his life was. "It's collapsing," he said. "We made some bad calls. There's an investigation now. I needed clean capital, something to buy us time." "So you sold Mom's house, my house, without telling me? To cover up fraud?" He stood abruptly. "It wasn't fraud when I made the deal. It just turned into something bigger." I stared at him. "And you didn't think to call me? Ask for help? Mom would have—" "Mom's gone," he shouted, fists clenched. "And you, Miss Perfect Daughter, you always had everything. Her affection, her approval, now the house. And what did I get? A pile of debt and judgment." I took a step back. "She tried with you, Brian. You pushed her away." He shook his head, eyes glassy. "You don't know the pressure I'm under. Carter wants his money back. If I don't find $250,000 by the end of the month, I lose everything. And you thought stealing from your sister would solve it?" He laughed bitterly. "Don't act like you care about the house. You've got your fancy job, your downtown apartment, your weekends in Napa. I'm the one drowning." My voice dropped to a whisper. "You made your bed. You don't get to steal from the dead to fix your mistakes." He looked at me, something flickering in his expression. Shame, maybe. Or maybe just panic. "You need to undo the sale," I said. "Tell Jason the truth. Give the money back." "I can't," he muttered. "It's gone." "Gone?" He nodded. "Transferred. Wired to a holding account under Malik's name. He said he'd multiply it in a week. Now he's ghosting me." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You gave our mother's house to a man who's now disappeared with the money?" Brian sat back down, head in his hands. "I was trying to save everything. I didn't think—" "No, you didn't." My phone buzzed. A message from Grace. "Judge granted the injunction. The sale is frozen until further notice. Please come by the office as soon as possible. We need to talk." I looked back at Brian. "This isn't over. The house is still mine. And now, you may be facing more than just bankruptcy." I turned to leave, but paused at the door. "One more thing. Did Mom know? About any of this before she died?" He didn't answer right away. But then, just as I turned the knob, he whispered, "She found something. A document. A letter." I don't know what it said. She locked it away before I could read it. Where? In the house. I left without another word. Grace's office was buzzing with quiet intensity when I arrived. Paralegals murmured down the hall, and phones rang in muted tones, like everyone was just one step ahead of something big. Grace waved me into her office and shut the door behind me. "The injunction's in place," she said. "That house can't legally change hands now. But Lisa, there's something else we need to talk about." She slid a stack of papers across her desk. Property records, probate filings, digital logs. I dug a little deeper into Brian's activities, she continued, and I found something odd. He filed a power of attorney form 3 weeks before your mother passed. My heart sank. A power of attorney? She was barely coherent by then. That's exactly the problem. Her signature on this form? It's almost perfect. Too perfect. You think he forged it? I think it's highly suspicious, she said. And if he used this document to push through financial decisions in her final days, including the sale of the house, that could be criminal. The rage I had been trying to suppress roared back to life. Do we have proof? Not yet, Grace admitted. But there's one more thing. When your mother was admitted to the hospice center, the intake nurse logged that she brought a small metal box with her. It was listed in the personal belongings report. But when I requested a copy of the final inventory, it was missing. Grace nodded. Vanished. No explanation. I stared at her, pulse spiking. Do you think that box is still in the house? If Brian didn't know about it or couldn't access it in time, it might be. We left her office 20 minutes later and drove to the house. Jason met us there, waiting on the porch with his phone in hand. Movers haven't been back, he said. Everything's quiet. Good, I replied. Let's keep it that way. The three of us walked through the familiar hallways of my childhood, stopping in the sunroom, the place Mom had always treated like her sanctuary. I could still picture her sitting in that faded armchair with her tea and crossword puzzle, the afternoon light dancing through the sheer curtains. Check the desk, Grace said. I moved to the old wooden secretary desk Mom loved. I'd gone through it after she died, but never with the intent to search, only to remember. But now I tugged at the bottom drawers with fresh eyes. That's when I felt it. The second drawer stuck halfway, just like it always did. But this time, when I reached behind it, I felt something hard lodged against the back. Jason helped me carefully lift the drawer out, revealing a small panel. It wasn't screwed down, just wedged in place. We pried it free. Behind it, nestled in a hollow compartment, was a small black metal box, dusty but intact. No key? Grace asked. No, I said, turning it over. It's not locked. I lifted the lid. Inside were neatly folded documents, USB drives, and an old cell phone. Jason let out a low whistle. Well, someone didn't want this found easily. I pulled out the documents first. Bank statements, wire transfers, names I didn't recognize. Carter Fields, Malik Idris, and Brian's, again and again. His name attached to unapproved transactions pulled from Mom's accounts. She was tracking everything, I whispered. She knew he was using her money. Grace leaned in, scanning the documents. And it looks like he used one of your mother's joint accounts to funnel money into an offshore LLC, registered in Brian's name. This wasn't just an emotional betrayal, it's financial fraud. Jason picked up the old cell phone and powered it on. Surprisingly, it still worked. There's a voicemail, he said, from 3 days before she passed. We listened. Lisa, if you ever find this, I hope you'll forgive me. I wanted to believe your brother would do the right thing, but I was wrong. I tried to protect you, to protect what matters, but I think time's running out. Don't trust what they tell you. Follow the money, and whatever you do, don't let them sell this house. My breath caught. She hadn't written a letter. She hadn't sent me instructions, but she had tried to warn me. She just hadn't lived long enough to make sure I heard it. Grace picked up one of the USB drives and slid it into her laptop. "What's on there?" I asked. Her brow furrowed as she scrolled. Holy hell. These are recordings. Phone calls. Between Brian and someone named Malik. He was trying to get the house appraised in secret. Planning to sell it weeks before your mother even passed. My knees felt weak. Jason steadied me. "She knew," I whispered. "She knew all along. And now, I had proof. Lisa, your brother's going to jail. But if he realizes we found this box, he may try to destroy everything. We need to act. Tonight," Grace said, her voice low and urgent. We stood in my mother's sunroom, the secret metal box open in front of us. Jason looked between us, tension rising in his shoulders. "You really think he'd go that far?" he asked. Grace didn't hesitate. "He's already forged signatures, lied in legal filings, and used estate assets to fund a fake business. If he knows we have the documents and recordings, he won't just sit back and wait." I looked down at the USB still plugged into Grace's laptop. The folder labeled Calls, Malik and Brian was full. At least a dozen audio files, all time-stamped. We'd only listened to one. It had been enough to make my stomach turn. We pushed the sale before probate finalizes. Her daughter's distracted with work. I'll handle the paperwork. No one's going to notice a missing signature. Not if we move fast. And another. Once the funds hit the holding account, we're in the clear. Just make sure she doesn't find the safe. Mom kept everything. I closed my eyes. I could hear her voice again. Mom. Fragile but sharp, speaking into that old voicemail. "Don't trust what they tell you. Don't let them sell this house." Too late, but not beyond repair. Grace snapped her laptop shut. "We need to secure everything. I'll take the documents and USBs back to my office and make digital copies immediately. But Lisa, be prepared. If he finds out we're building a case, he may panic. And cornered people do dangerous things." Just as she said it, headlights flooded the front window. A car door slammed. Then another. Footsteps on gravel. Jason moved to the curtain and peeked outside. "It's Brian," he said, "and he's not alone." My breath hitched. "Who's with him?" Jason squinted. "I think it's Carter. From the documents, Grace swore under her breath and grabbed the metal box. You need to stall them," she said, already moving toward the back door. "I'll leave through the garden and head to my car. Keep them talking. 5 minutes, no more. I'll text you when I'm safe." Jason and I nodded, and she disappeared through the back. Then the front door opened without knocking. Brian strode in like he still owned the place, Carter close behind. Carter was older, leaner, with sharp eyes and an expensive watch that screamed, "Shady money." He didn't smile. Brian saw me and didn't bother hiding his anger. "You've been snooping," he snapped. "You had no right." "Funny," I replied, standing tall. "That's exactly what I was about to say to you." He stepped closer. "Where is it?" "Where's what?" I said innocently. Brian's jaw clenched. "The safe, the files, whatever she left. Don't play dumb." Carter chimed in. "You're interfering with an active business transaction, Ms. Wexler. That's grounds for legal action." I laughed once. Cold, sharp. "You're talking to the actual legal heir of this house? You don't scare me." Jason stepped forward then, shielding me slightly. "You should go." Carter ignored him. "Look, Lisa, we can settle this. Quietly. Brian told me you didn't care about the house. That it was sentimental, sure, but not worth this kind of drama. We can still cut a deal." "Oh, I'm sure you'd love that," I said. "But I've seen the wire transfers, the off-book accounts, the voice recordings." That stopped him cold. Brian's eyes widened. "You, what?" "I know everything, and so does my lawyer. She's on her way to the district attorney right now." For the first time, Brian looked genuinely scared. "You don't understand what you're doing." "No," I said calmly. "I understand exactly. You stole from Mom. You tried to erase me. You committed fraud. And now, you're going to answer for it. Carter grabbed Brian's arm. We need to go, now. But, now, Carter hissed. They turned to leave, but not before Brian looked back at me with a strange mix of anger and something that almost looked like regret. You could have just let it go, he said softly. You could have just asked for help, I replied. The door slammed behind them. A moment later, my phone buzzed. Grace. Safe, en route to DA. You did good. Jason let out a breath. Think they'll come back? I shook my head. Number not with what we have. We locked the door, and I sat down on the same sunroom chair Mom used to love. The house felt different now. Less haunted, more mine. Jason sat beside me. You okay? I looked at him. I will be, but there's one more thing I need to do. The call came at 8:03 a.m., just as I was pouring my second cup of coffee. Lisa, this is District Attorney Monica Reyes. We've issued the warrants. Brian and Carter will be picked up today. I stood frozen in my kitchen, heart pounding. That's good, I said, exhaling slowly. Thank you. There's more, she added. We recovered additional evidence from Carter's office. You'll want to come down and see it. There's a deeper layer to this. An hour later, I was seated across from her in a small, windowless room at the DA's office. Monica slid a thick manila folder toward me. These documents were hidden in a locked cabinet. Carter had gone to great lengths to cover his tracks. Offshore transfers, real estate fraud, false contracts under multiple shell companies. But this, she tapped the folder. This one ties everything back to your mother's estate. I opened it and stared. There, in black and white, was a contract, drawn up 2 months before my mother's death, transferring all estate assets to a company called Hollow Pines Holdings. I've never heard of this company, I said. Monica nodded. It's fake. Set up by Carter and Brian. But here's the problem. This contract is dated, signed, and notarized, and it supersedes the will, on the surface at least. But it's a forgery. We believe so. The notary listed on the document died 3 years ago. My stomach turned. They forged an entire contract to override the will, I whispered. Monica closed the folder. Your mother must have suspected this. That's likely why she documented everything, why she hid the files in the desk. And the voicemail, the recordings, I added. She was trying to leave breadcrumbs. And you followed them, she said, offering a small, genuine smile. You did what she hoped someone would do. I left the office with the folder tucked tightly under my arm, walking through downtown like I was floating. Everything felt both surreal and vividly real, like the past few weeks had cracked something wide open, not just in my family, but in me. That afternoon, I returned to the house. My house. Grace had already filed the paperwork to legally reinstate the title in my name. The judge had ruled the sale to Jason null and void. Jason, graciously, had withdrawn with no hard feelings, and even offered to help with repairs if I chose to stay. The sun filtered into the sunroom, highlighting the dust still suspended in the air. I walked to the secretary desk, now empty, and opened the drawer one last time. It was strange how the house still smelled like Mom, a mix of lavender, old books, and lemon polish. She hadn't just left behind memories. She'd left behind a trail of truth. Quiet, but powerful. I heard a knock at the door. When I opened it, Riley stood there, Brian's ex-girlfriend. We hadn't spoken in years. I heard what happened, she said, eyes wide. Brian called me last night. He sounded broken. He has every reason to be, I said. She hesitated. I know it's not my place, but I always thought you should have gotten the house. Your mom trusted you. Everyone knew that. I nodded slowly. Thank you. I also came to tell you, Brian's going to take a plea deal. He's cooperating with the investigation into Carter's network. Apparently, Carter's been laundering money for years using fake real estate deals like yours. So it hadn't just been about the house. It had never just been about the house. After Riley left, I walked through every room. The old wooden staircase still creaked. The guest room still had the faded quilt Mom made the year after Dad left. And in the upstairs closet, I found a box labeled in her handwriting, Lisa, for later. Inside were photos. Me and her, me and Brian as kids, and one photo of the three of us together, smiling, long before the lies. A sticky note was tucked between the pages. If you're reading this, it means you stayed. Thank you for holding on to what matters. P.S. Even broken things can be beautiful again. I sat on the floor and cried. Not from grief or anger, but from release. The house was no longer a battleground. It was a beginning. 3 months later, after the final court ruling, the estate was settled. Carter was indicted on federal charges. Brian accepted his sentence. 18 months in state prison with a restitution agreement. He didn't fight it. We spoke once before he turned himself in. I don't expect you to forgive me, he said, voice shaking. But I'm sorry. I'm not ready to forgive, I replied. But I hope you become someone who deserves it. He nodded and walked away. Jason came by a few weeks later with fresh flowers and a coffee from my favorite cafe. You really staying here? He asked. Yeah, I said. I think Mom wanted this place to feel like home again. I owe her that much. He looked around, hands in his pockets. You're stronger than you used to be. No, I said softly. I'm just done being quiet.